Hello, and thank you for listening to the Keto Answers podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Gustin, and joining me this week is Ben Greenfield. Ben, if you don't already know about him, is one of the leading experts in all things fitness, nutrition, etc. This guy is kind of on the cutting edge, using his body as a human guinea pig. So he's done pretty much everything you could ever imagine from a biohacking standpoint. Writes about it on his blog. He has a podcast, all these different companies. Super knowledgeable guy, and we chat a lot about everything that he uses to simulate kind of a natural environment. And so whether that's light therapy, electromagnetic fields, if it's temperature control, etc., he's kind of done it all and packaged it up for some learnings. Stem cells, exosomes, peptides, training, his eating habits. We kind of cover everything in this episode. So tune in, and I hope you enjoy the show. But before we get started, I want to let you guys in on a little secret. And that is that we have some brand new keto bar flavors. And so the same thing that we had with the almond butter brownie that you guys loved and went crazy about, I think we sold out in 5 days when we released that one. We have lemon poppy seed and salted caramel. So these two are just ridiculous. The lemon poppy seed tastes exactly like a frosted lemon poppy seed muffin or cake or whatever you buy at Starbucks that is delicious, but it kills you, so don't buy those things. And then also salted caramel, which tastes pretty much like it says, so salted caramel. So these things are great, on the go, as a treat, whatever. Same standards we have with the other bar. So we tested blood sugar with this. No blood sugar spike, no effect in ketone levels. Actually increased a couple of team members' ketone levels. And yeah, otherwise the exact same. We actually bumped the collagen from 10 to 11 just because 10 grams was enough, so we had to go 11. Otherwise, these things are amazing. So if you want to try them out before they go to stock, which may happen very, very soon, we just launched them at perfectketo.com and use the code NEWKETOBARS to get 20% off your order this whole month. So go stock up now, and if you already have, then go grab your favorite flavor. Mine is the lemon poppy seed. Unwrap that little sucker and enjoy it for the show. Ben, thanks for being on the show, my man.
Well, thank you for having me on the show, my man.
Of course. People think a lot of times with biohacking that maybe the audience listening to the show isn't super familiar with, but they think maybe people like Tim Ferriss or Dave Asprey as like these, biohackers, for example. But it seems like you take things to another level, and it seems like you've been doing this for a very long period of time.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, so some of the, if you want to Google some of the super crazy stuff you do, I think it's super important because people like you push the envelope and get interest in this from a large scale, and it kind of pushes some direction in some actual research. I think that opens up and reduces some taboos. But how did you get started with this stuff, and what got you interested in doing all this?
Well, I think my bias is kind of related to exactly the question that you just asked, when it comes to people looking at me and thinking, he does extreme stuff like whatever, coffee enema or, some kind of stem cell self-inflicted injection. But, I came from the world of bodybuilding in college. And then after that, Ironman triathlon, after that, Spartan racing, and, sprinkled in all these stupid masochistic adventure races that probably took a few years off my life, and wilderness survival courses and bow hunting. And I'm not saying all this to sound narcissistic or braggadocious, but I've done a lot of stupid shit to my body over the years, particularly in the extreme performance sector. And so I think sometimes when I get a little bit edgy with, let me put it this way. For me to stick a tube up my butt and put some organic coffee in my rectum to clean out my liver, that's kind of just like a day at the office, right? Like I don't think that much about something like that. So, I've done weird things to my body pretty much. Gosh, honestly, since the bodybuilding days, right? Like, because the bodybuilders are the original biohackers. You go and lurk on bodybuilding forums, and they were talking about like SARMs and peptides and stem cells and all of these things that the health and wellness world seems increasingly interested in long before any of this hit the mainstream. Like back in the 80s, and so. I spent a couple of years as a natty bodybuilder in college, meaning that I didn't take steroids or hormones. I couldn't afford them. I probably would have if I had the money, but I was basically, using creatine, tons of caffeine, and any other central nervous system stimulant I can get my hands on, and lots and lots of protein shakes in a can. and lots of tuna fish. And that was kind of my approach. But I did get very interested in things like, how can you adjust water salt ratios? How can you adjust, the vasopressin levels in your body to be able to lose weight rapidly and get that hard, chiseled, ripped look, or, alternatively, make weight for a weigh-in, or gain muscle, with things like protein cycling or carbohydrate restriction, or so much, rice and broccoli and chicken that you want to shoot yourself in the head. But yeah, it all probably started with bodybuilding, and my master's degree during the time that I was doing that is in exercise physiology and biomechanics, but I also got very interested in nutrition. Like I took the stereotypical nutrition classes at University of Idaho, but I got really, really keen on microbiology, on biochemistry, even on pharmacology. So I just took, like, every elective I took for the last 2 years of college was pretty much all 400 and 500 level chemistry and biology, nutrition, pharmacology, and organic chemistry courses. So that really got me just interested in the science of essentially how food molecules or supplement molecules or anything else kind of affect different physiological pathways. From there, I pretty much really have been driven by selfish motives for the greater part of my life, meaning, what could make me better Ironman triathlon. In 2013, turns out I stumbled across ketosis, right? And took a deep dive into ketosis, but specifically for performance, and then branched out into how carbohydrate restriction might be beneficial for health or wellness. With something like bodybuilding, it was more like, carb cycling. With something like Spartan racing, you cramp on a rope climb, and you go and you study up on cramping because you never want that to happen to you again. It's not like you want to solve the world's problems of cramping. It's, for me, it was just selfish. It's like, I freaking hate that cramp. It used to happen to me in water polo in college, and finally in Spartan, I was like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. It turns out that cramping is essentially an alpha motor neuron reflex. It's not because you're low on water or low on electrolytes. It's usually because you've asked your muscles to do something during competition that you haven't asked them to do during training. And to reverse that alpha motor neuron reflex, all you need to do is taste something extremely salty or extremely spicy, and that reverses that reflex. So I used to just travel with these electrolyte capsules, and you pop open one and you put it in your mouth and it tastes like ass, but it reverses the cramp almost magically, right? And so you just kind of stumble across stuff like this, and so yeah, for me it's just self-experimentation and using my own body as a guinea pig, driven by some amount of research and knowledge just from my coursework in university, and also my ongoing research then, not research in a laboratory setting, but more, subscribing to aggregate feeds of research and science news, following a variety of websites. I read almost a book a day, and and usually they're books very myopically focused in health and wellness and nutrition and fitness. And how it goes as a podcaster, people just send books to you right and left, and so I've always got a stack of books to go through. And also I'm in a relatively I guess almost like a blessed position, because again, as like a podcaster and a blogger, I also get a lot of doctors and researchers and scientists and and physical therapists and nutritionists and dietitians just always emailing me research studies that they come across that are interesting, that they know are the type of things that I'm interested in. So I almost, like, I used to subscribe to a lot of journals, and I rarely even have to read journals anymore because so much comes across my plate every morning. I open my email inbox, it's like Christmas. I've got 10 different emails with, hey, Ben, have you seen this study? Have you seen this study? And then you add Twitter on top of that, where people are a lot of times, if you're following certain feeds on Twitter focused on whatever, longevity or NAD or ketosis or whatever. I mean, like, it's so easy these days to just stay up to date on anything you want to stay up to date on. So, long answer to your question, but that's kind of where I'm at as far as getting interested in all these things and staying interested in them.
And so, did you start the website as a way to track some of this stuff? Because you've gone over so many experiments throughout. The last, I'm sure, even 5-10 years. Is it?
No.
How do you codify learnings in?
No, I started my website, I guess, let's see, Mark Sisson started Mark's Daily Apple, well, like 2005, 2006. I used to read his blog. I decided to start my own blog like around 2000. I think it was like 2009 or so. And it was just, you know, I was racing like 4 times a month in triathlon, traveling all the world, you know, doing these Ironman races and going on these triathlon adventures, and even putting together groups of people and bringing them to different, you know, hot spots around the world, like Thailand and Japan, and leading people on these adventure races, or not adventure races, but adventures based around triathlon. You know, like I'd bring a group to Thailand, and I'd put together like a 2-week itinerary where we'd go to all these different hotels, and we'd train and swim and bike and run together. And then I'd find a couple of cool races, you know, in the country that were happening at the same time, and lead people on the races and teach them nutrition courses, and, you know, do bike fits and run analysis and swim analysis leading up to the race. And, I started to blog all of this, right? Like I'd blog race reports, and I'd talk about, oh, here's why I use this fuel, and here's why I'm now choosing a maltodextrin and fructose based fuel based on this latest research from the Gatorade Sports Science Institute, that the blend of carbohydrates gets better absorbed than just doing one carbohydrate. And I just love to write this stuff. And frankly, for me, a big part of it was that it was driven by sponsor revenue, right? Because like, you know, if Blue 70 Wetsuits wants me to write an article on swim form, and in that article I couched some kind of an ad for Blue 70 Wetsuits, it started bringing me in revenue, right? Like that. And at the time I was just a personal trainer, right? Like working out of a gym and doing some of these, you know, adventures that I'd lead when I go and do triathlons, or, you know, teaching triathlon courses in the local community, occasionally speaking at events. And so, you know, for me, I started the blog as a way to kind of put out some of the things I was finding about the human body and performance, but also, you know, it was driven by ad revenue and even affiliate revenue. You know, when I talk about something like a gel for racing, and, you know, I'd include my Amazon affiliate link to that gel or whatever, you know, it was kind of like a side business for me at the time. So that was kind of how my blog started. And you can still find it. It's at Ben Greenfield Try, as in triathlon, like TRI, Ben Greenfield Try.blogspot.com. Like that was my original blog. And eventually I bought bengreenfieldfitness.com and began to blog at bengreenfieldfitness.com. But originally it was just like Ben Greenfield Try.blogspot.com, all triathlon stories, triathlon adventures. You could see it, like, you know, me pushing my kids in a stroller, you know, down in Hawaii at Ironman Triathlon. And then eventually I put on my big boy pants, and the other thing that I did
Blogspot.
And I would do videos like way back in the day. It was like Rob Wolf, Dave Asprey, Jillian Michaels, like a very small handful of us had podcasts, like in the health. And this was back when you had to code your own RSS feed, right? And it'd always break. Like your podcast would break like every week. And I'd sit there in my little personal training office in Spokane, Washington, across the street from Gonzaga University, where I had a personal training studio. And at the end of the day, I'd sit there with the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research. And I'd go through all the different studies that I found interesting in like these 10 to 15 minute long videos. And then I'd publish them as a video cast to iTunes, and would also publish them to my website. Eventually I quit doing videos because I got tired of doing, you know, like putting on my shirt and doing my hair. And I realized like people didn't really care about the video like as much as the audio. So I started turning into audio podcasts, and like I did like 12 podcasts, and I got tired of just sitting there talking and started to interview some people. Then eventually I brought on like a co-host. I think my first co-host was, it was like this intern. He was helping me in my personal training studio to train some of my clients and to do some of my research for me. So I started to do some back and forth banter with him. And then eventually I brought on a guy named Brock, who was my podcast co-host for years. And we did like these Q&As where people could like write in their questions. Then eventually they could call in their questions. And, you know, that eventually became the Ben Greenfield Fitness podcast, which, you know, still runs today. But that was kind of how that came to be. And how my blog came to be.
And so when you're trying new stuff now or experimenting on yourself, are you tracking it with some master spreadsheet, or are you just seeing how it go? Do you journal about it, or is it just see what it is? And
dude, I'm a total type B. Like you walk into my office and it's like it's gotten better. It's pretty clean now that I've realized that a clean, organized environment helps you to keep a clean, organized mind. But I'm still the type of guy who will just have research papers all over the floor and books scattered here and there, and 10 different things that I'm trying just scattered around my office and the kitchen table, which drives my wife nuts. And I kind of have a multimodal approach to the way that I research what works and what doesn't in my body. If I want to enhance my longevity, I'm trying out whatever NAD and stem cells and exosomes and some of these different telomerase activating molecules, and then reporting on what happens. But it's very similar to Dale Bredesen's approach to Alzheimer's, right? Like he doesn't just use something like ketosis or high dose fish oil or hyperbaric oxygen therapy or these laser light devices for the head. He kind of puts them all together, and he's got, I think, over 100 case studies now on reversal of Alzheimer's. But it's not like he's just doing one thing and being like, oh, yeah, that kind of moved the dial here and this moved the dial. It's like you throw a bunch of stuff at the issue, and then you step back. The same thing with like Dr. Dan Engel and his concussion repair manual, right? Like you're doing a lot of different things, interestingly, very similar to like an Alzheimer's or dementia approach, and throwing in also like cryotherapy and sauna and, some of these nutrients to increase blood flow to the brain or to decrease permeability of the blood-brain barrier. And you put all this stuff together, you're like, hey, this is what seems to be moving the dial, but you can't necessarily identify any one specific factor, whatever, like buttering your smoothie. So that's kind of my approach too. I don't just take one thing and put it into my body and then study it, but I do quantify. I do a quarterly blood panel, more often than that. I do a quarterly gut panel. I do typically anytime some new genetic tracking software comes out, I'll upload my raw genetic data to that. And I just had my whole genome sequenced, so I've got a lot more raw data that I can upload. I use the Oura Ring to track sleep and heart rate variability. What else am I using right now? I use an app called NatureBeat to track sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. I'm trying to think what else. There's a blood telomere test that I use for testing my telomere length. Originally, I was using teloyears, but based on some of the research I've been doing, it turns out that life length and repeat diagnostics are two more accurate tests. So I'm doing more of that. But yeah. I do a lot of self quantification, but I don't do a very good job taking one single change and then tracking that on a spreadsheet over time to see what happens. I kind of take more of throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks type of approach.
What have you noticed has stuck the most over the last few years? I mean, I think that probably Oura Ring is something that seems like you're kind of is a non-negotiable that you wear every day. Anything else that kind of comes to mind as far as either tech like that or things that you've learned over the course of the time, like this is super important, it's going to be either sauna or yoga or whatever it is, or the things that you
yeah. So tech for tracking, I would say the Oura Ring, just because it's so small, so elegant. I can put it in airplane mode. It's not bombarding me with Wi-Fi or Bluetooth like a lot of these other quantification devices. And I would say that along with of all tests, like a urinary organic amino acids profile, you can learn so much from that. And honestly, like if people are pretty savvy and you get a profile like that, you barely even need a doctor to walk you through it. I mean, the PDF that accompanies a test like that is pretty comprehensive. I think it's one that flies under the radar as far as giving you a lot of information all at once.
Do you use Genova, or what do you use?
Yeah, the Genova Diagnostics ion profile with 40 amino acids. It's a great one. It gives you a lot of information, and if you've already got like a standard blood panel from your doctor, it fills in so many gaps. So I would say of all the tests that I do, that's That's one. And then I have one that I worked with Wellness FX to design called the Greenfield Longevity Panel. That's not cheap, but I was just like, if you want to test everything that you could test for longevity, for health, for wellness, for basic nutrients that you can analyze in the blood, I designed one for males and one for females, and it's like a $1,200 test. But I mean, if you were to do that on a yearly basis, you're gonna learn a ton as well. So those two tests are pretty useful. As far as I think giving you the most bang for your buck. And then as far as to answer your question about protocols that have moved the dial for me the most, it would probably be the use of light therapy, right? Like I do a lot with light therapy, both things like the Vielight device on the head to increase. It increases blood flow to neural tissue. It increases nitric oxide production. It kind of activates cytochrome C oxidase in the mitochondria, specifically in the head. It was originally developed for Alzheimer's and dementia, but I'll wear it when I'm meditating. I'll wear it when I've returned from hefty travel to reduce some of the inflammation in neural tissue that can occur from that. And I'll usually combine that, like a treatment for me when I'm working during the morning for about 20 minutes, is I'll put that headset on, and then I've got one of these Juve lights in front of me and one behind me. And those can help with things like collagen synthesis, skin health, blood flow, nitric oxide production. I usually do it naked, and so I get a little bit of light on the testes, which assists with Leydig cell activity and testosterone production. In many cases, because I travel so much, I will often put on glasses. I use these glasses called the retimers that produce a whole bunch of light for the eyes, and then a device called the human charger, which produces a bunch of light for the ears. And when I do that in the morning, it sounds like a lot, but it takes me like 2 minutes to walk into my office and put all this stuff on, flip it on, and then start going through my morning emails or research or reading or whatever. Just blasting my body with light on a daily basis like that. It's very similar to just going for a long walk in the sunshine on the beach, but I live on a north-facing slope in Spokane, Washington, where I don't get a lot of sun, and a lot of times I need to be indoors working, and that really has a profound impact on my focus, on my mood, on my endocrine system, on my cognitive function. So light would be one that I think has moved the dial a lot for me.
Do you travel with all those things, or is it some that are with you, or is it kind of when you're at home?
I travel with the Vielight.
Is that just VI light?
Yeah, VIE light. I have a big interview with them on my site somewhere about the science behind their technology. So I travel with that. I travel with this device called the human charger, which is a light producing device that goes in your ears that interacts with photoreceptors that go directly to your brain. I travel with this retimer device, which does the same thing. It's like a greenish blue light spectrum for your eyes. And then I travel with the tiny, tiny little version of the Juve called the Juve Go. So I've got a lot of this stuff I can just toss into my bag and travel with pretty easily. A couple of other things that have really moved the dial for me is I'm still competing heavily, particularly in things like obstacle course racing, some different bow hunting competitions where you got to, carry a lot of weight. It's a lot of impact on the joints. It's like obstacle course racing with a weapon where you have a heavy backpack on, you're crawling over barbed wire, you're doing burpees, you're stopping, you're shooting, you're back down on the ground. So I have a lot of joints that inevitably get injured as I'm going through all this. So I use a lot of pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. It's also called PEMF. I've used that type of therapy for about 4 years now, but 2 years ago I got one of these pulse centers units. And it's very, very high intensity PMF. It was developed for the racehorsing industry, but man, it comes with like coils, a bed that you can lay on, a chair that you can sit in, different things that can be placed on different joints. My son sprained his elbow. We were training jiu-jitsu the other day. He's 10 years old. I put him on it, and he was fine by the next day. I just blasted it. So if you can hit an acute injury quickly, it reduces inflammation. It increases healing and blood flow very quickly. I have a massage therapist who will come to my house sometimes to give me a massage, and I'll just lay on that table for about 2 hours while she gives me a massage. And that thing has made a big difference as far as being able to really assist with knocking out injuries pretty quickly. And it can be also used like on the thyroid, on the testes, on the heart. Like they have a lot of different protocols. That's another one.
What is that? What is the mechanism on that? What is going on with that thing?
Well, pulsed electromagnetic field therapy, it's very similar to almost like grounding or earthing, which would be, very similar. Like sunlight is a natural form of photobiomodulation. Grounding or earthing would be a more natural form of pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. But this is targeted in very powerful doses. And so it opens and closes calcium channels. It increases blood flow. It causes the muscles to actually relax, especially if the muscles are in a state of spasm, which they often are. If they're surrounding like an injured area, it just relaxes everything. So it seems to do a really, really good job at healing injuries and has a lot of other health and wellness applications as well. And so if I could name a third, it would just be the use of temperature, which I've done for a very long time. I mean, back when I was I would use cold when I was racing Ironman triathlon, especially in some of these hot environments, to allow my body to be able to stay cool. Like I remember one year when I was racing the half Ironman World Championships in Vegas, I would wear like these arm sleeves infused with xylitol that would give you a cooling sensation for the arms. And I had a hat that did the same thing. Those are made by a company called Zoot, Z-O-O-T. And then I also had, based on the research on the Stanford cooling glove and the fact that we have what are called arterial anastomoses in our hands, in our wrists, that can kind of cool the blood as it comes out to the extremities. And then when it returns to the core, the blood is more cool. And so they make these little devices that you can hold on to while you're racing or running that are like frozen and cold. And I would keep all this stuff in an ice cooler and transition next to my bike. So when I come in off the bike and switch to the run, I'd grab this wrist device. And I even had like a cooling vest. I would study up on, ways you could cool the core. And it turns out something as simple as like chewing ice as you go through aid stations and swallowing it helps to cool the core. And then that eventually led to my interest in cryotherapy, right, and cold thermogenesis, and this idea of just taking a daily cold shower for general health purposes, for nitric oxide production, for increased tone of the vagus nerve, which is going to improve your nervous system health and kind of the interplay between your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system. So I really got very interested in cold and still use cold therapy on almost a daily basis. And the same goes for heat, right? I got an infrared sauna a few years ago and started to spend a lot of time in that, considering that your skin is your body's largest detoxification organ. Being able to sweat out a lot of the metals and the toxins that I encounter when I'm traveling as frequently as I do. I used to use dry sauna to train for Ironman. For the about 4 to 6 weeks leading into Ironman Hawaii, I would do all my bike rides wearing multiple layers of cotton. I would finish up workouts and go sit in the sauna for long periods of time, not only to increase heat tolerance, but to increase red blood cell production. And you can get a red blood cell production increase very similar to, like blood doping or the use of erythropoietin or any of these kind of like illegal performance enhancing drugs simply by getting exposed to heat, particularly after a workout. So I got very interested in heat for performance reasons and now use heat quite a bit just for general health and wellness. Specifically for me, that involves just sitting in an infrared sauna for 20 to 30 minutes, either in the morning doing some yoga or in the evening reading a book when I'm at home. So to come full circle and answer your question, the Aura Ring, a really good blood panel, a really good comprehensive amino acids panel, which is urine, would be kind of some of my biggest self-quantification wins. And then currently some of my biggest wellness wins would be the use of light, via photobiomodulation, the use of grounding or earthing via pulsed electromagnetic field therapy, and then the use of both cold and heat on a pretty regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, I like what I'm hearing here as far as what you're doing is for protocols, that it's light, electromagnetic field or frequencies, and temperature, which are all just normal, natural things, but you're taking those and making it so you can actually get those in a controlled manner.
Right, which is almost the definition of biohacking, right? You're taking one thing and making it more powerful or more concentrated or decreasing the amount of time that you need to spend doing it. I could certainly drive off of my slope out in the middle of the forest and go hunt down sunshine, walking and riding my bike or driving my car. But, I've got to, be in a podcast, work on a book chapter, work on a blog post, et cetera. So I don't have the time to do that. And the other interesting thing is when you look at this, a lot of these things affect the mitochondria, right? Like light, heat, cold, grounding, earthing. When you read a book like the Body Electric by Robert Becker, about how much the human body is reliant upon the charge across the cell membrane, the millivolt potential across the cell membrane. A lot of these things are affecting that millivolt potential and also affecting the activity of the electron transport chain in the mitochondria. Probably the only other thing that I didn't talk about yet that could influence mitochondria in a very beneficial manner, in addition to cold, heat, earthing, grounding, and light, would be water and minerals. So I drink a very large glass mason jar of hydrogen-rich water in the morning and in the evening. And when water has hydrogen gases dissolved in it, it does a much better job creating what are called exclusion zones, which is based on the research by Dr. Gerald Pollack at University of Washington on the fact that you do get a little bit better hydration and movement of water through human vasculature when the water is structured. And hydrogen-rich water is a very good way to do that. It's also a very good anti-inflammatory and antioxidant. And I combine that with a lot of minerals. I use a lot of salts. I even drink a very concentrated form of minerals, again, in the morning and in the evening when I have that big glass jar of water. Right now I use this stuff made by Quicksilver Scientific called Quintron. It's like a hypertonic seawater-esque mineral solution. So I'm basically giving my body all of the minerals / electrolytes / water that it needs to maintain some of these electrical potentials. And when you combine that, again, coming back to this multimodal approach with light, with grounding, with heat, with cold, if you come at this from an ancestral standpoint, you're essentially simulating what someone would be experiencing if they were like outside, barefoot or wearing animal skins on their feet, in the sunlight, often near water or in forests, and they're drinking water from natural springs. Getting mineral exposure from like really good natural produce or wild plants grown in the ground. It's almost like you're simulating what you'd get if you were an ancestral person, living outdoors largely and getting exposed to a lot of this stuff naturally. You're simply simulating that from a biohacking standpoint in higher, more targeted doses, while still being able to do it living in a post-industrial era where you might also need to be working at a computer during the day, being indoors, unable to spend, 8 hours outside camping and grounding and earthing and finding natural springs, et cetera.
Right. So with the hydrogen water, I just want to come back to that for a second. Do you make that yourself or you buy it or how do you get that?
The way that I do it, because a lot of these things I have to figure out how to simulate when I travel too. So I use hydrogen water tablets when I travel and just put a couple of tablets in my morning glass of water and in my evening glass of water. And then at home I have a hydrogen water generator. The tablets that I use and the water generator that I use, those are made by a company called Trusii, Trusii.
Got it. So yeah, this is one of the things that I have a research assistant that I had recently look into hydrogen water. He didn't find that much compelling, but what would you say the guy that did a lot of research was, so I can take a peek at that?
Yeah, go to the website of the Molecular Hydrogen Foundation. That's where a lot of the research is at. Tyler LeBaron is a very, very bright young gentleman who I talk with him a lot. He travels to Asia frequently, where they're doing a lot more of the research, a lot of the development of some of these supplements and hydrogen water generating machines. And like my assistant just had a concussion. She's doing the same protocol as I am right now. She's using the Violite and she's using the hydrogen rich water, and it clears up her head almost immediately. My wife gets headaches sometimes and she'll drink the hydrogen rich water and almost instantly her headache goes away. I mean, and there's a lot of really good research on it. And it's not like it's like a, multi-level marketing scheme, one of these water websites where where you click on the website and it says opportunity in the upper right hand corner. Like it's actually really, really well researched. I'm actually shocked at the amount of research on this stuff and how few people know the benefits of hydrogen rich water. And if you're able to just like go to Find a Spring, is it findaspring.com or findaspring.org, and get like natural spring water in a big glass carboy and get that delivered to your house, or go out and harvest it, I suspect you probably aren't going to need hydrogen rich water because it's naturally hydrogenated. When it's kind of traveling through underground springs, passing over rocks and getting infused with minerals, et cetera. But, if you're drinking municipal water that's sitting in cisterns or in pipes, or, even just, getting fed into your house and going through filters, so it's a good idea, in my opinion, to add some hydrogen gas back into it.
Interesting. And so all the stuff that you're doing, tweaking around, do you find it that ever takes away from your ability to be present, or do you think it maybe adds to it?
What do you mean?
As far as, always trying to think about, okay, how am I optimizing this thing? How am I going to add this in? I need to get the light. I need to get the hydrogen water. As far as just like sitting back and like taking in a moment and, instead of maybe being distracted about how you're improving, you're changing.
No, I mean, most of this stuff is pretty quick, right? Like I wake up in the morning, I go pour myself a glass of water, hop into my office, takes, a minute or two to flip on all the light machines, and I just do the light. If I want to do some yoga, I go and do it in an infrared sauna instead of, in my living room. If I want to read a book, I'll go do it in an infrared sauna. If I've got some podcast or audiobook I want to listen to, maybe I'll flip on my underwater MP3 player and go and do a couple laps in the cold pool, or, take a 5-minute cold shower. And so a lot of this stuff I weave in. I'm a creature of productivity, and I love automation. I love being able to ensure that this stuff isn't taking away from my ability to be productive or mindful, or hang out with my kids, or have family dinners, that type of thing. So I never let this stuff detract from just the activities of daily living, and I really don't think you need to if you figure out ways to kind of work it into what you'd be doing anyways.
Got it. One of the things that I wanted to kind of selfishly ask you about, because I haven't had the time to research all this, but what skincare products do you use? It's just like one of these things where I know that there's probably very few trusted brands that don't have a ton of chemicals in it that mess you up and increase estrogen and all that stuff as a male, especially. Anything that you found on that end?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff now. You can go to the EWG website and find a host of good skincare products. But what I personally use, like my protocol, is on a weekly basis, I do a clay mask where you just I mix this clay colostrum mixture with apple cider vinegar, and then you smear it on your face and you just leave it on there for like 20 or 30 minutes, let it dry, and then go take a shower. And if you can use it's like a derma roller with microneedles right before you do that, you kind of just like microneedle your face for about 2 minutes. You get a lot better effect.
Andy stuff like Alitura or?
Yeah, that's exactly what I use. Alitura. Four Sigmatic has a good one too. They call it like food for your face. Smells really good. Smells like chocolate. So that's a good one. I'll bounce back and forth between the Four Sigmatic one and the Alitura one, but that's just once a week. And then morning and evening, what I use is a skin serum that I, selfishly enough, I personally developed a skin serum that's it's on my website at Keon, at getkeon.com. So I do that morning and evening, and prior to doing that or after doing it, I put on the Alitura moisturizer as well. So basically I do a weekly clay mask, and then morning and evening I use a moisturizer and a skin serum. And then the other thing, of course, that has a really good impact on your skin health overall, including the face, is the infrared light that I was talking about, either sweating frequently in the sauna or using these photobiomodulation units, or both.
So you do any kind of like soap or shampoo or conditioner, or you just, I've just kind of scrapped that stuff as irrelevant.
Yeah, there's some good brands out there. For me, again, like as a blogger and a podcaster and an Instagram guy, people are always reaching out and offering to send me different soaps and products. But right now, let me think, what do I have? I think it's called, blanking on the title, it's like Man Revolution, something like that. But what I have upstairs is I take a shower about once every 3 days or so. So I'm kind of a big fan of maintaining a normal skin microbiome. So I've got a cold pool and a hot tub outside. Right. And those are all, they're ozone treated to kill off bacteria. I use minerals in them as an alternative to chlorine. Once a week, I kind of microdose them with chlorine, but they're very clean. And so I go out there to the cold pool or the hot tub. I rinse myself down literally with the garden hose, which feeds well water. So I'm just showering myself with well water, jumping in the cold pool, jumping in the hot tub just about every day. And then every 3 days, I take a shower. And when I take a shower, I use a really good soap, really good shampoo, really good conditioner. But I think it's called Man Revolution is the one I use right now. But there are all sorts of different brands. Like sometimes I'll use Onnit soap. Sometimes I'll use, whatever paraben-free, phthalate-free, clean stuff that shows up on my doorstep. I'm very kind of agnostic when it comes to soaps and shampoos and conditioners, just because it seems like about every month or so I get some box from some different company that knows I like healthy skin products, and I'll just use whatever happens to be in that box. But I wish I could remember the name of the one that's up in the shower right now.
Got it. Cool. Change gears a little bit. You talk about stem cells a lot, and this is one of those things that maybe isn't as natural. What have you noticed there? And you mentioned exosomes earlier. Have you played around with exosomes?
Yeah, exosomes they're very small cell signaling molecules. Like when I was in exercise physiology in college, like they were just called vesicles, and nobody really knew what they were for exactly. But it turns out that they can enhance the ability of cells to be able to communicate with each other via these tiny, tiny vesicles. And if you combine those with stem cells, they allow stem cells to travel throughout the body more effectively and to signal the release of what stem cells typically cause to be released, like cytokines or white blood cells to areas that need healing, for example, or the formation of new tissues or the differentiation of cells. And so a lot of kind of anti-aging or longevity physicians are now using a protocol where for anti-aging, they'll do like an IV infusion of stem cells combined with exosomes. Or if you're looking at a joint, for example, you can inject with stem cells, but then also inject with exosomes. And I've done stem cells in isolation and also stem cells combined with exosomes. And when you combine them with exosomes, they do seem to act more quickly and be a little bit more efficacious. There's another form of cells called adult pluripotent stem cells. They're also known as very small embryonic-like cells. And those, in my opinion, are just as good as going overseas and getting a culture-expanded stem cell, because in many cases, people are going overseas to get these culture-expanded cells that give you billions and billions more stem cells in terms of your stem cell count compared to what you can do in the U.S. In the U.S., you aren't legally allowed to modify stem cells in that manner. It's illegal. However, you can actually, and I had this procedure done recently, and it just felt like, it made me feel like I was 16 years old. I did it like a month and a half ago. My energy level, my sleep, my sexual performance, everything seems to have improved a great deal. And what they did, this was a company in New York City, a doctor named Holland Chen, Chen. He took about a pint of my blood and then stressed it overnight in a cold medium, which causes it to release a whole bunch of these very small embryonic-like cells. And then the next day, he infused those back into me and then combined those with exosomes. And that was like an IV infusion. And, it took like 30 minutes to put them back in. And that's a very cool protocol. That's one that I think not a lot of people know about, but that, especially when combined with exosomes, kind of eliminates the need for you to say, get a giant nail into your hip and, get your own bone marrow and use that for the stem cells, or undergo kind of a relatively uncomfortable liposuction procedure, with a needle to isolate your fat cells and get the stem cells out of those. So if you can combine exosomes with blood-based stem cells that you've gotten, or even, umbilical or amniotic cells, I think it kind of removes a lot of the need for these procedures where you're banking your own cells from bone or from fat.
And you were just taking this in via IV?
Yeah, you can do it via IV. If you did have a joint issue, you could do joints as well. I think the problem is that a lot of doctors are still not using thermal imaging for joints, meaning they're just kind of injecting them into near the area of pain. Like, you have to get really targeted with stem cells. In my opinion, if a doc isn't using ultrasound imaging to guide the needle into an area where there actually is an effusion or inflammation or scar tissue, et cetera, then it could be kind of a waste of your time. You got to target these things pretty directly into the exact area where there might be a tear or a pocket of inflammation.
Are you worried at all with exosomes as far as driving any sort of cancer growth or tumor stuff like that? Or you feel that, with fasting and a bunch of other things and you being as healthy as you are, it's just not even a factor to worry about?
Yeah, and in the presence of it, it's like if you have prostate cancer, you should not use testosterone. It can definitely cause growth of that cancer. If you have a tumor, you should consider, very similar to the China study, a mitigation of protein. And that study really, that most of that book was bunk. But what it did show is that, when you cause cancer in a rat via the administration of a toxin and then follow that up with high protein, particularly from casein protein, you can cause cancer growth. Well, if I ever got cancer or if I ever had a tumor, I would go very low protein. There are a lot of things I would do, but I would definitely be lowering my protein intake. Same thing with exosomes or stem cells, right? Like if I had a risk for undifferentiated cell growth because of the presence of a tumor, I would be very careful with that. Now, that being said, I've had a full body MRI, which is a good way to see if you actually have anything going on, whatever, pituitary tumor, pancreatic tumor, et cetera. And if you really, those are spendy full body MRIs, but if you really want complete peace of mind that you don't have some kind of a growth, that'd be the way to do it.
Got it. And then, speaking of which, it seems to be very in vogue right now that if you stimulate mTOR at all, if you eat any protein, you're going to die early. And it seems that, I think I saw on your social media the other day that you're trying to put on muscle mass. So you're eating like 5,000 calories a day. So I take it you're not worried about dying an early death from doing a transient bout of muscle gain, or what's your approach here?
No, the body responds very well to press-pulse cycling, right, to feast-famine cycling. So I'm still fasting 12 to 16 hours a day. I still have a compressed feeding window. I'm just eating a whole damn lot more calories, from wild-caught salmon and grass-fed beef and eggs and avocados and olive oil and I do a lot of I bake a lot of pumpkins and just slather them with almond butter and raw honey, but I eat a lot of these nutrient-dense and calorie-dense foods during a compressed feeding window. So my body is still able to enter autophagy pretty easily, and I also do a weekly 18 to 24 hour fast, like a dinner time to dinner time fast. So I'm still getting cellular autophagy, and then I'm stimulating mTOR, and then I'm going back into autophagy. And I've only been on this mass gain protocol for 2 weeks, so this is pretty recent. And so far, my body fat has actually gone down. It's decreased by 0.5 percentage point, but I've gained 4 pounds already in just 2 weeks, which is significant. Like that's more than I was able to do when I was bodybuilding. Probably because when I was bodybuilding, I didn't know that much about foods like liver and organ meats and wild caught salmon. I was doing tuna fish and whey protein shakes. So I think when you do really good, almost like Weston price-ish, calorie dense and nutrient dense foods, combined with lots of heavy loading, throw in some cellular autophagy with fasting, it seems to be so far working quite well.
Are you trying to just stack muscle mass for longevity, or what is the overall goal of doing this protocol now?
I want to make myself harder to kill. I've got a lot of survival courses. I've got a lot of big bow hunts. I have a big 12-day hunt coming up in the Arctic Circle. I'm only 5% body fat. Sometimes I get cold when I'm out there in those situations for long periods of time. And I just think at this point, since I'm not doing Ironman triathlon and some of these sports that require you to have a really good power to weight ratio and stay very lean, I feel like going into my later years of life, or I'm 37 now, but as I go into what's maybe the second third of my life, I want to really go into that with as much muscle mass as possible. And I also just want to be able to, in very simplistic terms, be able to survive in the wilderness, lift heavy stuff, and stay warm when I'm in extremely cold conditions. And I'm at 175 pounds. And when I was in college, I was closer to 190 and just felt a little bit more resilient in that state. So, it'll make, doing something like a triathlon harder, but ultimately I think for life in general, it's just one of those things where it's been since my bodybuilding days that I've been over 200 pounds, and I don't even want to get up that high, but being about 15 pounds heavier is definitely something I think that will assist me with my, my survival, my wilderness, some of my competitions, et cetera, at this point.
Yeah. So you touched on nutrition. What are you doing for training to help facilitate the muscle growth? Anything fancy, or just kind of a pretty simple?
Just basic 3 day stuff. Yeah. I'm kind of going back and forth between 3 days a week of 5x5. So overhead press, pull up, or a pull up version, pull down, weighted pull up, etc. Chest press, any version of a chest press, any version of a deadlift, any version of a squat, 3 days a week, 5 sets, 5 reps, heavy as I can go. On the off days, I kind of do a little bit of muscle triggering by, playing around with the kettlebell a little bit. And then the other protocol I'm using is a push pull, Monday push, Tuesday pull, Wednesday off for sports or basketball or tennis or jujitsu or whatever, then Thursday push, Friday pull, and then Saturday and Sunday just kind of, again, whatever, a hike, a paddleboard, whatever the case may be. So yeah, really it just comes down to lifting heavy stuff and eating lots of food. So there's a lot of different ways to skin that cat.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier with the bodybuilding that, they've been ahead of the curve with peptides, things like that. Are you doing anything like that to aid in your mass gain phase currently?
Yeah, I just started onto a bunch of peptide protocols. I'm doing humanin and MOTS-C for mitochondria. Just started into ipamorelin in the evenings and in the mornings for a growth hormone pulse. Just started into Cmax for cognitive performance. I got very interested in a lot of these things when I was recently at the American Academy for Anti-Aging Medicine conference in Vegas. Like peptides are kind of the wave of the future right now when it comes to modulating hormones, increasing recovery, increasing muscle gain. BPC 157 and TB 500 are 2 other peptides. You just need to be careful. Like, just don't go to a website and willy-nilly buy some peptides. It's very hard to get like a very good, clean, pure version of a peptide. In most cases, you'll want to work with a doc, get a prescription, from a company like TaylorMade Compounding, for example. They're doing really good peptides, and you want a good, clean, pure version. Understand that most of them, aside from BPC 157, can't be taken orally. They need to be injected, usually subcutaneously. But yeah, I've started on the peptides, and man, those are also a shot in the arm, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, this is something that I wanted to start playing around with myself. For people who don't know what peptides are, how would you explain them in a very simple way?
Yeah, they're like sequences of amino acids, and each sequence of amino acids, depending on its configuration, can cause different things, like improved cognitive performance or increased repair of myosin and actin fibers in muscle tissue, or decrease inflammation in certain joints, or increase production of growth hormone, et cetera, or, improve sleep onset. So they're very cool. You think of like collagen or even, essential amino acids, taken orally. A lot of people experience some pretty good joint or gut healing or overall just overall vitality and wellness from using those type of things. Peptides are like a very concentrated version of those that you're bypassing digestion. You're getting them straight into the bloodstream via subcutaneous injection, sometimes intramuscular if you're using something like BPC 157 or TB 500 for an injury. But yeah, ultimately they work very well.
Yeah. Instead of, I think what most people think is that you have to inject them, therefore they're like a steroid or exogenous hormone, where it's actually, there's not a negative feedback loop like there is with some of those exogenous hormones. So yeah, I've been super interested. I haven't played around with them all, but
yeah, I'd be more concerned about the shampoo with the parabens and phthalates on it that you might be smearing on your head when it comes to disrupting your hormone signaling than I would about peptides.
And are you doing like 3 or 4 or 5 injections a day? Or is that something that, or do you just put them all in one? How does that work? Can you get them compounded?
It's coming out to about 3 a day. Because by the time I hit some joints or post workout with TB 500, and then I'll do like a morning and evening ipamorelin, morning Cmax, morning humanin and MOTS-C. It's typically 3 times a day that I've got a needle out doing a peptide.
And as far as sleep strategies, you mentioned you do some of this stuff before bed, obviously for more pulse style hormonal things. But as far as sleep strategies, what are you using there to crank yourself out and get deep sleep?
Yeah, I'll go through this pretty quick because I have another interview in 5 minutes. But basically, for deep sleep, there's obviously a lot of things you can do. Normal sleep hygiene, dark room, cold room, preferably below 65 degrees, some kind of noise to cover up any ambient noise like white noise or or actually there's better research on pink noise. So you could use an app like SleepStream, for example, to produce pink noise, decrease your room temp to 64 degrees, consider sleeping on a chili pad, which would decrease the temperature of the surface you're sleeping on even more. Use a light blocking mask and make sure all the lights in the room are off, and even consider just installing red incandescent bulbs in your entire bedroom so you've got no blue light in there at all. And these are all things that I do. And then a couple of things that have worked very well for me for improving sleep onset has been CBD at higher doses, like 100 to 150 milligrams of CBD, which is pretty high. But in most of the research, you're seeing 300 to 900 milligrams for things like anxiety and depression. A lot of these things people claim CBD is good for. So you need a lot of it if you're going to use it for something like sleep.
Yeah, but I've actually noticed that CBD affects my sleep kind of like if I would have like 2 glasses of wine. So my deep sleep is not as much. And I think that, the latency improves, but not the deep sleep for me. So I don't know if it's just a receptor based.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the other thing that a lot of people don't know about are vagal nerve stimulators. Like there's a device called the Circadia made by Fisher Wallace. And for example, like I lay in bed and read Harry Potter at night for about 20 minutes before bed. I just read fiction. I get my mind off of work and everything. And I've been using this vagal nerve stimulator called the Circadia. It just goes on either side of the head while I'm reading. And man, that seems to just plummet cortisol and decrease stress significantly and really improve sleep onset and even your deep sleep cycles later on. So light, dark, sound, a little bit of vagal nerve stimulation, reading some fiction, taking some CBD. That's generally how I do things.
Awesome. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, Ben. Thanks for being on the show. Where can people find more about everything that you're up to?
Just bengreenfieldfitness.com. Got a blog, do an article every week. This morning's was on testosterone enhancement. And then I've got also a podcast, which you can find anywhere fine podcasts are found. It's just the Ben Greenfield Fitness Show. And and then my supplements company is Kion at getkion.com, Kion.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben.
Cool. Thanks, bro.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Keto Answers podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, but even if you didn't, I would love a review. Just go over to iTunes, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and pop in a review so we can get found by more people, get better guests, and have the information that you need. So please go to iTunes, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and leave us a review. And if you're new to keto, head on over to perfectketo.com/podcast and enter your email for all our top tips and guides on getting started with the ketogenic diet. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.